For about a year or so, my life took a bit of a downward spiral. I was kind of lost. I had to do something to change the direction of my life. First thing she did is go and address the England coach, Jack Rowell. She tapped him on the shoulder. He said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm the mother of the number 8 you brought on 20 minutes too late." That experience I had and shared in 1997, I would say was the greatest rugby experience of my life. We used to play rugby in the back alley, the back of my house, and I was aged about 8 years old, and they took me down to Staines Rugby Club. It taught me that rugby's pretty tough. So here we are, the jersey that probably most people will remember me playing in, WASPS Rugby Club, a club that I stayed at for over 20 years. I joined in 1990, and there's a lovely little story behind my kind of journey really through rugby. I very tragically lost my sister Francesca in the Marchioness riverboat disaster in 1989. I was 17 years old. I was really struggling emotionally, mentally, wondering why things happened in the way that they did. And probably for about a year or so, my life took a bit of a downward spiral. I was getting myself in and out of trouble. I was kind of lost. And then in about 1990, I decided I had to do something to change the direction of my life. And the thing that I decided to do was join a rugby club. Having been to Ampleforth College, there was a little spark that I remembered about playing rugby and how much I'd really enjoyed the experience. So I decided that I needed to join a rugby club. Sitting at the table, and I opened the newspaper and I looked at the sports pages, and I was drawn to the league tables of rugby clubs. And it just so happened that this wonderful club, WASPS, was at the top of the table in the old Courage League Division 1 as it was then. So I thought to myself, WASPS, that sounds like a really interesting name. And they were top of the table. I thought, I'll go there. I felt very much at home from the minute I walked into the rugby club. The club put its arms around me. I needed a bit of a support system to really help me. It extended that out. No one asked about my past. You were accepted exactly as you were. And it provided a real community for me, a real family at a time when I needed it the very most. Every time I took the field in a WASPS jersey, I wanted to honour the memory of my sister Francesca, and more often than not, I think we got over the line. England came on my radar pretty early on in my career. I played for England under 18s, under 19s, under 21s, so amazing experience, and that kind of really fueled my ambition to go on and try and represent my country, represent England. And I managed to get picked in the Jeff Cook squad, the Jeff Cook era in 1993. Now selection has changed over the years. I'm sure the players are informed through some digital notification these days. I'm not quite sure how it works. Certainly when I was growing up, there was a few ways of finding out whether you were selected. Turn on CFAX. Do you remember CFAX? Used to turn that on the TV. You'd have to wait 5 pages. Am I in the team? Yeah, I'm in the team. But actually, normally you just got a straight phone call from the team manager or the coach just to let you know you've been selected. And I actually made my debut, probably in a shirt very similar to this one, against South Africa. I came off the bench, ran about the 60th minute, played the last 20 minutes of the game. Unfortunately, we didn't win the match, but obviously I had a big smile on my face because I'd made my debut for England. And a very proud moment. Obviously, my mother was upstairs. She shared in that moment. First thing she did is go and address the England coach, Jack Rowell, and she tapped him on the shoulder. He said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm the mother of the number 8 you brought on 20 minutes too late in the game. It's pretty obvious what you need to do. He needs to start for England." And lo and behold, a week later, I was starting for England at number 8. So clearly my rugby career had nothing to do with me and everything to do with my mother's insistence that I played number 8 for England. On to a very special period in WASPS Rugby Club's history, the Warren Gatland, Sean Edwards era, I guess, from I think 2001 to 2004. The black and gold of WASPS really dominated the English club scene and the European club scene. And these two jerseys, one I wore in the Premiership final in 2004 and one that I wore in the European Cup final against Toulouse, our first ever success with that wonderful dramatic late try from Rob Howley. And really that era was a very special time for us at WASPS. It was always important to mark moments as well. If you win, you know, you've got to celebrate those moments because they're memories, they're experiences that you need to share. Life is about sharing. There is nothing greater in my mind in playing top level team sport than sharing those moments together. My mother used to say to me, you can always catch up on a good night's sleep, but never a good night out. And that sort of stuck with me really throughout my rugby career, to be honest with you. But just to be very clear, when we lost, I didn't go out and I didn't celebrate because I didn't feel I had anything to celebrate. But when we won, more often than not, we would go out and we would celebrate and we'd make sure we enjoy it and we'd mark the moment, which meant we more often than not had a pretty high win ratio.
The final showdown, November 22 at Telstra Stadium in Sydney, the Olympic Stadium.
Probably the most famous shirt that I was very lucky enough to wear, or one of the most famous shirts, the number 8 jersey from the Rugby World Cup final. If you have a look here, something that Clive Woodward introduced into the England team way before the World Cup was to put your name, the match, the date, and obviously that is a date, 22nd of November 2003, that is etched in the history of every English rugby fan. It's quite incredible to think it was actually my 65th cap for England, so it wasn't my first paper round. But really, this jersey is very symbolic because it was the jersey and the team that won the World Cup for England, the first ever Rugby World Cup that England were to win, and the only one at this moment in time. I was tremendously proud to play for England, and I was tremendously proud to sing the national anthem. And I guess being slightly Irish Italian makes me a very dangerous Englishman, makes me a very passionate Englishman, and not afraid to show and share my emotions. English people tend to be quite conservative, quite reserved, and that's not that they're not feeling those emotions inside, it's just that they prefer to keep them, internalise them. I couldn't do that at times. I found it very difficult to do that. Everything that got me to that place out on the rugby field in Sydney sort of came out on that night. The huge sacrifices that everyone makes to put you into the position that you're in. What people don't realise is that sport at the highest level is very selfish. It's all about you, and there's a lot of sacrifice that's made in order for that to happen, and a lot of collateral damage around you as well. And I think it's important to recognise that, to understand that, and to be driven by that. I guess at that moment everything came out emotionally, and I couldn't hold back the tears, simple as that. I remember quite vividly key moments in that World Cup final. I remember conceding the first try, as we did in the semi-final. And then I remember we had a purple patch in the middle of that first half where we were attacking Australia wave after wave. And I do remember coming round the corner. I saw Johnny Wilkinson out the corner of my eye, so I passed it back inside to him. You know, he had two options. He had Ben Cohen on his inside, or he had Jason Robinson on his outside. And when you've got a player of the ability of Jason Robinson outside you, one of the world's best finishers, you know, and you see that, that's exactly what Johnny Wilkinson did. And we went into that game knowing that we were the number 1 side in the world. We believed that we were good enough to win the World Cup. We'd beaten Australia 6 times previously, home and away. So we knew we were a better side than them. They knew we were a better side than them, but we still had to go out there and prove it in a World Cup final. And my word, we made it quite dramatic, didn't we, really?
Australia come back. Here it is for Johnny. Has he done it? He sure has.
Do England do anything other than dramatic in World Cup finals? Do they do anything other than extra time? It wasn't our plan to make it go to extra time, but ultimately that's what happened. I'm not that sentimental about rugby jerseys. I probably should be more than I am, but this one is one that I've kept. So here we go, the England rugby jersey from 2007, the World Cup jersey. A World Cup full of ups and downs, highs and lows. It's a very different role for me in that World Cup. The coaching staff somehow added a 1 onto the usual number 8 that I wore. I found myself on the bench. Nick Easter was the man in possession, and deservedly so. You know, it was nearly an incredible turnaround. It wasn't quite meant to be. Maybe, who knows, ifs and buts, if Mark Cueto's try had been given by Alan Roland in the corner, who knows what might have happened. But South Africa went on to win the World Cup, and England, I guess, could be proud really of the way that we turned things around. And for me personally, it was a bit of a virtuous sort of end to the circle really. I made my debut against South Africa in 1995, and I played my final game for England against South Africa, coming off the bench again. So I exited by the same door as I arrived, I guess. My son actually came on the pitch eventually. Yeah, it's lovely for your family to share in those moments. This as you all know, is the British and Irish Lions jersey from Australia 2001. I was lucky enough to represent the Lions on 3 occasions. In 1997, of course, on that incredible and ultimately successful tour to South Africa, and then on to Australia, coached by Graham Henry, and then to New Zealand in 2005, where I broke my ankle after 20 minutes. So if you don't mind, I won't talk about 2005 or 2001, but we will talk about 1997, which was an amazing experience. I remember the uniqueness of rooming with your opposite number. So my first roommate was Rob Wainwright, who obviously played for Scotland, and him and I would be vying, as it turned out, for the number 6 jersey. I remember rooming with Keith Wood, who was just a wonderful man, wonderful human being, wonderful rugby guy, wonderful snorer. I had to take his bed out of the room and put it down the corridor, put it outside Jeremy Guscott's room. Talk about work hard, play hard. That was the attitude out in South Africa. Not sure you'd be quite able to take that same attitude to a tour as we did in those days, but from what I can remember, we played every Saturday and we hit it hard every Saturday night. To play for the Lions, and that experience I had and shared in 1997, I would say was the greatest rugby experience of my life. So this is a jersey that's very special to me. It's a charity that I set up. It's called Dallaglio Rugby Works, and essentially we work with disengaged, disadvantaged young kids. We use the power of rugby as a hook to go into essentially a mix of different schools, but mainly pupil referral units or alternative provision schools where these young people are at risk of exclusion, and we use rugby as a way of turning their lives around. I always believe you are what you're exposed to in life, both good and bad, and for me, I was lucky enough to be exposed to a number of very good things, but a lot of young people are not as fortunate as we are. And when I finished my rugby career, I felt driven to give back. I think with success comes responsibility, and my father was an Italian immigrant, my mum had a million jobs, and my parents worked their fingers to the bone, really. So, you know, I've come from, like a lot of other players, from a very working class background, so just happened to play rugby, but it's about having positive interactions. And we've got to share in those experiences, you know. Life is tough, and we all have these bumps in the road, and we've got to help each other get through that collectively. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my Jersey Tales, so please do leave your comments below. You can like, subscribe, or hit the bell for notifications.